I've discovered something important. Something incredibly important. I made a mistake. In one of my videos, I have several videos on the channel where I tell people about coincidence in diameter of things like pipe and flare guns and shotguns and bullets and that sort of thing. I also have a video up where I talk about how the 410 shotgun shell has to be one of the most annoying things on earth to build a shotgun shell projector. Building a slamfire shotgun for 410 is actually kind of a pain in the ass because it's an odd size compared to the pipe. On the other hand, 12 gauges, you can practically just find the parts by accident. I literally did. But anyway, Schedule 10, 3/4 inch pipe, has a 0.88 inch declared, obviously it's all over the place, internal diameter, and it's also 22.45 millimeter, and it has a 1.05 inch outer diameter. Could make a tube magazine. Since the shell rim on the 12 gauge is 0.886 or 22.5, this means that you'd have to sand it out or rely on a lot of variation, or just buy really bad ammunition. Now let's get on with the next project, or coinkadinkle diameter similarities. You can watch YouTube videos where people put a 22 caliber long rifle or Magnum, I don't remember which, they just say 22, nobody ever really mentions which one, into a specific straw and drop it. And depending on what straw you get, it'll hold on really tight or be really difficult to put in, or it won't hold on very well at all. But it acts like it keeps the bullet from pointing nose down, so you can actually drop it onto a cement surface from high altitude and it'll go bang. And doing that with a blank would probably be safe-ish, but it's not safe to do it with a live bullet. But anyway, I also mentioned in another video that 22 calibers and some others are rimfire. They're not centerfire, so they have a bunch of peculiarities about them that make them not amenable to putting really simple, shooting gallery toy guns together all the way up to shotguns, and being able to change diameters. You have to make special considerations. I also mentioned in a couple of videos a long time ago that there was at one time something called a Velo-Dog. Now what that means is either fast dog versus big dog. That's actually what the French people think it means. Or Velo-Dog referring to velocipede, fast feet, fleet of foot, which is the actual meaning for bicycle. And it's, dog guns that are used for shooting dogs. Or it was referring to the big dog pistol versus the little dog versus the fast dog. Non petit de pooch. Because people would say it was like a bulldog, tough as a bulldog. These are advertisement campaigns were done at the time for certain pistols. So, here's the fun one to look up. All the older formats that were considered rather popular in Europe and were low power and aren't really being used anymore had one peculiarity. They were centerfire 22s. So I was doing something really simple and silly. I typed in the wrong question into Google and got an interesting answer. There's an equation I listed, and I think it's still listed below in this video, for if you go to Google and type in the equation, you can find out what caliber a gauge is and vice versa. And I made the mistake by, like being an idiot, and typed in 410, which is really just a caliber, as if it was a gauge. Now, I made a joke a while ago that 420 gauge works out to 22. But it's an approximation. But here's the funny one. When I typed in exactly 410 gauge, it gave me a very strange answer. The number it gave out was almost exactly 22 caliber. 410 gauge, if it was a gauge instead of a caliber really, it would end up being 0.225, almost exactly. So I thought, I've never seen a 0.225 bullet diameter for a rifle or a pistol. So I decided to look it up. I figured it'd be one of the obnoxious neck downs or some obsolete round, and it turned out to be one. It was the Velo-Dog. The Velo-Dog actually is declared diameter, according to at least 3 articles, of .225 or 22.5 caliber, which is kind of funny sounding. It's almost as funny as 100 gauge being 9mm, which is actually true. So anyway, I was looking through this, and I found out when I typed in that number and let it use the approximation function on Google, which is hard to find, and I still don't remember how to do it. I just looked it up. I found you have to type in calendar. I forgot what you have to type it in, but here's the list of weird centerfire cartridges that existed. The Velo-Dog, and then the Cooper Centerfire Magnum, which is literally just a 22 Magnum someone invented out of their butt so that you could have a reloadable and remakeable 22. And the Maynard Extra Long. It's the same guy who created the Maynard tape, aka the cap gun tape you guys use when you're kids. And the 221 Askins. There's a long story behind that one. So I'm just going to retell from a previous video, and this will act as an update. In 1894, Velo-Dog was the Galand Company's proprietary centerfire jacketed. Yes, it's a full metal jacket. 43 grain, 730 feet per second, 54 foot-pound maximum capacity. That's a very important number, by the way. 5.7 millimeter, but in reality, 22.5 caliber bullet. Or, and this was actually on one box I found, 410 gauge, humorously done, shotgun shell for 22. And it would fire salt or cayenne pepper. If you're not aware of the salt joke, and French, for some reason, they had a funny thing of putting in the margins in some books what looked like warriors fighting giant snails and slugs, and a joke about throwing salt or shooting something with salt, like we talk about, loading a buckshot rock salt gun, and then someone coming up with a bug assault gun. This is actually a running joke about salt and bugs. And at one time, someone having a literal shotgun, and it was the same diameter. I found out it was the same one. That was literally a 22 caliber. It was actually 21 and point something caliber. That was a moth gun. It was for shooting moths and butterflies, but the person said when they made it, don't shoot butterflies, they're elegant. And some count or something would literally go hunt moths because it was a challenge. Now, that's a funny anecdote, but the moth gun, or butterfly gun, or bug gun. So let's continue. 54 foot-pounds energy capacity out of the cartridge. We're just talking the cartridge. 50 foot-pounds is the minimum limit to be lethal. And there's a story of someone literally trying to kill themselves with the dang thing and having to fire twice in the temple, which should be the easiest place to actually do this. Well, would be. So anyway, it was used as a double-action only hammerless revolver with a trigger that folded into its body, so it had almost no exposed parts. And originally it was created by Charles Francois Galand. Now, what is useful about this? Well, it was a 22 caliber centerfire that ran primarily a primer and black powder. And it would only put out, you already know where I'm going with this, it would only put out about 54 foot-pounds of actual force. Now, the thing about this that is important or interesting is it's just about as big as a 22 Magnum, but it has all the power of a 22 short, and it's double the capacity of a CB or BB bullet. They actually made a rimfire one that fired BB gun pellets, a literal one. I mean, it's not just something you might have thought up before you looked up the video. And it was a practical round for firing really, really short range in a room. Now, the thing about this is that at the time, again, that was black powder. If you put modern smokeless powder in the thing, it's a 22 Magnum you can refill by putting in new primers. I mean, it's a legit reloadable and customizable round. Well, what happened to it? Well, it was sold up till the year 2010 from a couple of companies, and a couple of companies still sell them. I have a set of links below. You can actually buy this. But here's the funny thing. What about the other ones? Well, I want to point out all of the power of a 22 short, but in a Magnum-sized round, because the powder, modern smokeless powder, was used later, and they didn't want to use it. They switched over to 22 long rifle, which I'm a little bit suspicious about, and 25 ACP, which is also the same power level. These were steel guns. These were actually well made in some cases. They were designed to be very, very tough, and they were designed to be nearly a perfect carrying gun or concealed carry gun because they eliminated your ability to accidentally set the thing off. They were not drop safe, but they could easily be made that way. And it was a double action pistol. It was a revolver. And if you look at some of the designs for them, they're extremely hackable. I mean, you can modify them to do all sorts of things, including the very important thing. A modern blank firing starter pistol with a centerfire 209 primer hole in it is an almost perfect cut and paste of the same damn gun. It's literally a Velo-Dog style gun. They're made bigger, but you can get them small. And the primers are 23.6 to 24.5 caliber. That's the casing shape size. And the length of them is 0.3 inches to a little over and a little under by a couple of notches. And they have a rim on them that's around 0.30 to 0.31. Almost exactly the same thing you would have on the back of a 22 Magnum. I mean, it's obviously bigger, but you could literally get one of these Velo-Dogs and make it into a blank revolver. You just have to bore obstruct it, which isn't very difficult to do with that. But the thing about it that's interesting to me is that this also brings up another thing about it. This is a legit, obsolete cartridge right now after X number of years. And by definition, if you have a gun that has an obsolete cartridge, if you make a copy of it and make it fire blanks, it's not a firearm and you're not legally regulated as much. And you're not required to bore obstruct it. You could make it a completely legit gun and just deliberately load 209 primers, which are insanely cheap, or blanks. And if you over-designed it the way they were, it wouldn't be considered out of character. It would just be a modern reproduction of an obsolete weapon. And this is the funny part. Well, Charles Askins in the 1930s, designed a 22 caliber match grade cartridge, which was not limited, based on a shortened version of the Velo-Dog case, because he found one when he was working Border Patrol. And it intrigued him, and he wanted to figure out how he could duplicate it, because the centerfire on it worked well, and he could get cartridges for it, kind of. Mostly they were available in Italy up to 2010, for instance, but this is in 1937. His idea was to come up with a centerfire cartridge with a low recoil, like a 22 long rifle, for use in competition. He fired his modified Colt Woodsman pistol, it was made out of other things, at a national match in 1937 and won, and then they excluded using it because a centerfire with almost no recoil meant that you could get away with getting better shot pattern. You could practice better. It was an unfair advantage. And this is the other thing. The CCM Cooper Centerfire Magnum 22 and the Maynard Extra Long 22 have almost exactly the same characteristics, and all of them have a base that is amenable to you starting off with a 209 primer. Now, why would I be talking about this on YouTube? It's not illegal, even though you're going to find a shit ton of pages that talk about, well, under these conditions it's illegal, but they don't tell you when you can do something. The purpose of the ATF is not to tell you when you're allowed to do something. It's supposed to find instances where it's not, up to and including refusing to acknowledge that you can use rifled inserts on a gun and it's perfectly legal. They just keep talking about smoothbore under conditions where it'd be illegal, because they can't talk about things you're allowed to do. They talk about restricting you. It's a bias they have. But in this case, it's rather funny. If you get something that's listed as not a firearm, but make a firearm out of it, that's actually a violation of the rules. However, if you copy the entire design and before you assemble it, make it actually work as a 22 caliber quote-unquote centerfire, and there's no bullets for it, you haven't broken a law. All you've done is designed on purpose an obsolete piece of equipment. This is like making a wood gasifier vehicle. They do exist. You can make one, but it wouldn't work at the pump. You know, it would be based on something different. These are all fairly similar to each other, and I'll have a link below in the description as an imager if you want to actually learn about this. But here's the funny part. A piece of metal tubing about the size of a straw, a bullet, some propellant, and the shotgun primer, and you have identically the same thing. You could just glue them with JB Weld, which they didn't have at the time. No brazing, no other work. Incredibly easy to fix because essentially the rest of the shell is just simply a piece of metal tubing anyway. And this would eliminate the ability for it to involve any illegal parts. Metal tubing, primers, and lead aren't legally considered ammunition. Just some thoughts. Thanks for watching. Good day.